Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with fireworks or fate. It comes quietly, like a conversation you almost didn't have. This is a story of Amelia Rose, a woman who'd stopped believing in second chances, and Cal Bennett, a man who never thought he deserved one. What began as a blind date neither of them wanted slowly became the evening that changed everything, not because of grand gestures, but because of honesty, warmth, and the kind of peace that only comes when two lonely souls finally stop pretending they are fine. Stay till the end. You won't expect what she discovers about him. I didn't want to go. That's how the evening began, with resistance. After months of turning down invitations, my friend finally cornered me with that look people give when they are tired of watching you isolate yourself. "It's just dinner," she said. "You don't even have to like him." I told her I wasn't ready. She said no one ever is. So I went. I arrived early, out of habit more than interest. The cafe was quiet, low lights, the faint hum of soft jazz, a place that looked designed for people pretending to be fine. I chose a corner seat near the window, half hoping he wouldn't show up. He did. No suit, no polished shoes, just a plain shirt, sleeves rolled up, and a watch that looked like it had seen better days. He smiled. Not the confident kind, but the kind that comes from someone aware of their own awkwardness. "Amelia?" he asked, almost unsure. I nodded. "You must be Cal." He sat down gently, as if he didn't want to disturb the air between us. The first few minutes were what you'd expect. Safe topics, polite nods, and the clinking of cutlery that felt louder than necessary. But then he said something simple, something small that shifted everything. He said, "You look like someone who misses silence." I remember freezing for a second. No one had ever noticed that about me. I asked him what he meant. He smiled softly. "You have that kind of stillness people only get after they've been through noise." It wasn't flirtation. It was observation, honest, uncalculated. And somehow it disarmed me. The rest of the dinner felt different. He didn't try to impress me. He didn't fill the space with words. He asked questions, and when I answered, he listened, really listened. He spoke about small things, books he never finished, a park he liked walking through at night, a bakery that made the best croissants in the city. Simple, ordinary things that somehow made him feel real. At one point, I asked him what he did for work. He hesitated just for a second. "I do some consulting," he said. "Nothing too serious." I didn't think much of it then. His tone wasn't defensive, just private. The food arrived. We both laughed at how awkwardly the waiter set the plates down, spilling a bit of water on the table. It wasn't a big deal, but it broke the tension. Cal made a quiet joke, nothing loud, nothing meant to be funny, just something to make me comfortable. And for the first time in months, I wasn't watching the clock or calculating an exit. I was just there. When the evening ended, we both stepped outside. The city was cold, the kind of chill that makes people pull their coats tight and hurry home. But neither of us moved. He looked at me, uncertain, and said, "I'm bad at these things. Should I say I had a good time?" I smiled. "You can say it if you mean it." He nodded. "Then I mean it." There was something boyishly honest in that. No smooth lines, no practice charm, just sincerity. We said goodbye, and he walked in the opposite direction. No request for my number, no "let's do this again." Just a wave, and he was gone. I stood there longer than I should have, watching his figure disappear into the blur of streetlights. On the way home, I caught myself smiling, not the foolish kind, but a quiet one, the kind that creeps up when you realize you felt seen. I didn't know what this was, or if it even was anything. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of being alone. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how calm he was, how he never looked at his phone once, how he didn't try to fill silence like it was something to escape. It was strange. The world I lived in was full of people trying to sound interesting. Cal didn't, and that made him more interesting than anyone I'd met in years. I remembered his eyes, steady, observant, like someone used to watching people before speaking. There was something about that kind of presence that made me want to understand him. Not because I was drawn to mystery, but because I sensed pain. Not loud pain. The kind people carry quietly. The kind you don't notice unless you've carried your own. Maybe that's why the night stayed with me. Not the food, not the conversation, but the stillness between us. The next morning, I told my friend it went fine. She asked if I'd see him again. I said I didn't know. She rolled her eyes. You never know, she said. But deep down, I think I did. Something about that man, his stillness, his simplicity, felt like the beginning of something I hadn't felt in years. Not excitement, not attraction. Something steadier, quieter, peace. And maybe peace was rarer than love. That's how it began. Not with sparks or promises, but with a calm I didn't know I needed. I didn't know then how much that single evening would change the shape of my days. I only knew that when he said goodbye, a small part of me didn't want it to end. Maybe that's how real beginnings always happen. Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly, almost without you noticing. She didn't expect to hear from him again. Not because the evening went wrong. It didn't, but because it felt too still, too unhurried. It wasn't the kind of date that promised excitement. It was the kind that left her unsure if anything had even begun. Days passed quietly. Work, home, and the same gentle rhythm of solitude she had learned to live with. But every time her phone buzzed, she found herself checking, hoping it was him, then pretending she wasn't. When his message finally came, it was short. Would you like to get coffee again? Same place. No emojis. No small talk. Just that. She stared at the screen longer than she meant to. Then she typed back, "Sure. Tomorrow." It was strange. She didn't know him well enough to miss him, yet there was a calmness in the thought of seeing him again. The next day, she arrived early again. Maybe too early. The cafe was half empty, rain tapping softly on the glass. When Cal walked in, he looked exactly as he did before. Plain shirt, worn shoes, sleeves slightly rolled. But this time, she noticed the details. The faint tiredness in his eyes. The way he took a quiet breath before speaking, as if measuring his words. "You came," he said, half smiling. "I did," she replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You asked." They sat today. It wasn't awkward, just quiet. Two people learning to sit with silence. When she asked what he did for work, he hesitated, then said, "Consulting. Mostly small projects. Nothing exciting." She nodded, not prying. The way he said it, simple, understated, matched him. Amelia shared a little about her job in marketing. The long hours, the politics, the exhaustion of pretending to care about things that didn't matter. He listened closely, like he understood without judging. At one point, he said softly, "You sound like someone who stopped liking what she's good at." That line stayed with her. She didn't answer right away, only stared at her cup, tracing a circle with her finger. "Maybe I did," she finally said. It wasn't flirtation. It was honesty, the kind that makes you see yourself more clearly than you want to. After that day, their messages became a quiet routine. Not constant, not intense, just enough to remind each other they existed in each other's small, ordinary worlds. Sometimes he'd text late at night, "How was your day?" Sometimes she'd reply hours later, long, "You?" There were no promises, no games, just two people who didn't need noise to fill the gaps. One evening, she found herself telling her friend about him. "His different," she said. "I don't know how to explain it. His calm. He doesn't try too hard. It's like he's just there." Her friend laughed. "So, you like him?" Amelia smiled faintly. "I think I do. But it's not like that. It's not fireworks. It's more like," she searched for the word, "peace." Her friend raised an eyebrow. "Peace is rare. Don't waste it." A week later, they met again, not at the cafe, but at a small park near the river. Cal had suggested it. "I need air," he'd texted. "Join me." He was sitting on a bench when she arrived, staring at the water. The city light shimmered across it, like small moving stars. They talk about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, books they half finished, people they missed but never reached out to again. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "Why do you always sound like you've lived twice?" He chuckled softly, looking away. "Maybe I just learned a few things the hard way." Something in his tone carried a quiet sadness, not dramatic, just real. She didn't ask more. He wasn't hiding something. He was protecting it. And that, somehow, made her trust him more. When she got home that night, she replayed his words in her head, the way he said them, the weight beneath them. She realized she didn't know much about his life, where he worked, where he lived, who he really was. But she didn't feel the need to. For the first time in years, not knowing felt okay. The next morning, she found herself smiling at her reflection before work. Something inside her had softened, not because of romance, but because someone had finally seen her without asking her to be anyone else. That evening, she got another text. "Dinner tomorrow." Just 3 words. She stared at them for a long moment before typing back, "Yes." But as she hit send, she couldn't shake the quiet question forming in her mind. Who exactly was Cal Bennett? Dinner wasn't planned. It wasn't fancy either. Just a small Italian place tucked between 2 bookshops. Quiet, a little dim, the kind of spot you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. When Amelia walked in, Cal was already there, reading something on his phone. No suit, no show, just him. And somehow, that steadiness made her feel safe. They ordered pasta, wine, nothing extravagant. Conversation drifted easily at first, like daily routines, small frustrations. But then, in between those silences, she noticed how he spoke about people, never with bitterness, never with pride. When he mentioned helping a friend with a company issue, she caught the tone. Calm, experienced, like someone who'd been in rooms that mattered. "You give a lot of advice for someone who calls himself a consultant," she teased lightly. He smiled, setting his fork down. "Old habits. Hard to drop." She didn't press, but something about the way he said it lingered. Later, as they walked out, a sleek black car slowed near the curb. The driver nodded at Cal, a small gesture, respectful, familiar. Cal gave a brief nod back, like it was nothing. The car drove off. Amelia noticed, but stayed quiet. They walked in the cold evening air, their footsteps steady against the empty street. "You ever feel like you're in the wrong chapter of your own story?" she asked suddenly. He looked at her for a moment before answering. "Every day. The trick is not letting it define the next one." It hit her harder than she expected, because she was in the wrong chapter, working a job that drained her, living a life that felt paused. Back home, she couldn't sleep. She thought about the way he said it, the calmness that comes from someone who's already been through something, and learned not to talk about it. The next morning, she checked his social media out of curiosity. Nothing. No photos. No updates. Just a simple profile with almost nothing written. A man who existed without needing to announce it. Days turned into weeks, and they kept meeting. Slow, consistent, unhurried. She began noticing things. How he always paid in cash, how he never mentioned co-workers, how sometimes his phone would buzz and he'd ignore it like it didn't matter. Once, when she asked if he was close to his family, he paused before replying. "Not really. Some things change when people start expecting things from you." That sentence stuck with her. It wasn't about family. It was about something else. Still, she didn't ask, because what they had didn't need explanations. It wasn't built on curiosity. It was built on comfort. One night, while they sat at their usual cafe again, she noticed a man across the room glancing their way. Twice, then a third time. When Cal caught his eye, the man quickly looked down. A flicker passed between them, almost invisible. Cal's jaw tightened for just a second, then softened. Amelia didn't say anything until they left. "Someone you know?" He exhaled lightly. "Someone I used to work with. It's fine." But it didn't sound fine. Later that night, when she texted him, "You okay?" He replied after a long pause, "Yeah, just old stories. They catch up sometimes." She stared at his message, trying to read what wasn't written. There was something about Cal, a sense that he was rebuilding himself, quietly, without wanting anyone to notice. A few days later, she had to work late. When she left her office, rain was falling hard. Her phone buzzed. "You out?" It was him. "Just left work," she texted back. "Stay there. I'll come." 15 minutes later, his car pulled up, Not the one he usually took, but a sleek, dark sedan she hadn't seen before. He got out, holding an umbrella over her head as she hurried in. "You drive?" she asked, a bit surprised. "Sometimes," he said simply. No further detail. As they drove, she noticed the quiet luxury of the car, the leather seats, the digital console. Not new money, old, understated. She wanted to ask, "Who are you, really?" But she didn't. Instead, she said softly, "You didn't have to come for me." "I wanted to," he replied. His tone wasn't romantic. It was steady, almost protective. Something in her chest shifted. Not love, not yet, but a deep trust she hadn't felt in years. He dropped her home and didn't come in. Just waited until she was safely inside. Then, through the window, she saw him stand for a moment in the rain before driving off. That image stayed with her long after. At work the next day, Amelia's manager called her in. Something about another campaign she didn't care for. But even as she nodded through the meeting, part of her mind drifted back to Cal, to the way he carried himself, quietly confident, never needing to prove anything. She began to realize something. It wasn't just that Cal was hiding a truth. It was that he had nothing to prove anymore. And for the first time, she wondered if the man who lived so quietly was the one who had already seen too much noise. It began with a mistake, a simple one. Amelia had stayed late at work, trying to fix a client report that had gone wrong. Her laptop froze, her boss blamed her, and by the time she stepped outside, it was nearly midnight. Cal was waiting at the curb, leaning against his car, hands in his pockets. She hadn't told him she'd be late, but somehow he knew. "You didn't text me," she said, half smiling, half surprised. He shrugged. "Didn't need to. You look like you'd need a ride." That small act, quiet, unannounced, stayed with her. He wasn't the kind of man who asked if she was okay. He just showed up when she wasn't. As they drove, she told him about the chaos at work, the mistakes, the tension, the feeling of being invisible in a job that didn't see her worth. He listened without interruption. When she finished, he said softly, "They don't deserve how hard you try." It was simple, but it landed deep, because no one had said that to her before. The next week, something unusual happened. Amelia's firm was pitching a campaign for a new corporate client, a big one, the kind of deal that could change careers. Her team was nervous. During the meeting, the client's representative arrived, older, sharp, with an air of quiet respect. He greeted the room and then paused, looking directly at her. "You're Amelia Rose." "Yes," she said, uncertain. He smiled slightly. "Cal Bennett speaks very highly of you." For a moment, she couldn't move. Her name, Cal's name, in the same sentence. Her co-workers turned, curious. She forced a polite smile, nodding through the rest of the meeting. But inside, her thoughts were racing. Who exactly was Cal Bennett? That evening, she didn't text him first. She waited. An hour passed. Then two. Finally, her phone buzzed. "Dinner." When they met, she didn't ease into it. "Someone at my firm mentioned you," she said, voice steady but searching. "He said you recommended me." Cal looked at her quietly for a moment, then nodded. "I did. You deserved a chance." She blinked. "You know that client personally?" He hesitated, then answered, "We've worked together." "Worked together," she repeated. "As in, you were consulting?" His silence stretched too long. Then he said carefully, something like that. There was no defensiveness in his tone, no attempt to cover it up, just quiet acceptance. She leaned back, studying him. "You don't talk much about your life, do you?" He met her eyes. "Most of it stopped mattering when I realized what I lost trying to build it." For the first time, she saw it, the faint exhaustion behind his calm. The kind that doesn't come from work, but from years of carrying something too heavy to explain. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. The air between them changed, not colder, just heavier. A few days later, while waiting for a meeting at work, Amelia opened her laptop and typed his name into a search bar. Cal Bennett. Nothing at first, then one link. A news article, 2 years old. CEO of Bennett and Holt Group steps down after internal dispute. Her breath caught. The photo was him, younger, cleaner cut, in a dark suit. Same calm eyes, same restraint. The caption underneath read, "Known for his integrity and quiet leadership, Cal Bennett left the corporate world citing personal reasons." She stared at the screen for a long time, the cafe noise fading around her. The man she thought was just normal was someone who'd built everything and walk away from it. When they met that evening, she didn't bring it up right away. They walked through the park like usual, the air cold and still. Finally, she said, "I looked you up." He didn't react. "I figured you would." "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Because I didn't want to be that version of me again," he said quietly. "The one who only mattered because of a title." She swallowed hard. "You think I'd care about that?" He looked at her, his expression soft. Everyone cares at first, until they realize what comes with it. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind moved through the trees, faint and cold. Finally, she said, "You could have trusted me." He nodded slowly. "You're right." It wasn't anger that filled her, just confusion, a quiet ache, because she realized she wasn't upset that he'd hidden it. She was hurt that he'd assumed she'd be like everyone else. When she got home that night, she sat in silence, her thoughts circling. Cal Bennett, the man who never bragged, the man who'd left an empire behind without ever mentioning it. She scrolled through their messages, every word, every silence. None of it felt false. He had been real, just incomplete. And yet, deep down, she understood him. Maybe they weren't that different, both tired of pretending, both trapped between who they were and who they were supposed to be. Still, as she turned off the light, one thought stayed with her. If he could hide something that big with such calm, what else had he learned to hide? The days after she found out were different, not in what they said, but in what they didn't. Their messages grew shorter, slower. "Busy today." "Same here." The pauses between replies became longer than the words themselves. It wasn't anger that built the silence. It was hesitation, the kind that comes when trust isn't broken, but quietly shaken. Amelia didn't know what to say. Every time she tried to type something, it felt either too small or too big. When they finally met again, it wasn't planned. She was leaving work late. He was standing by the same cafe where they first met, as if something had pulled him there. "You look tired," he said softly. "I could say the same," she replied. Her tone wasn't cold, just honest. They sat inside at their old table by the window. Same 2 cups of coffee, same unspoken questions. For a while, they talked about work, about traffic, about anything that didn't matter. Then finally, she said it. "I wish you had told me sooner." Cal nodded slowly. "I know. I just wanted something normal. Someone who didn't look at me and see money or mistakes." She studied him for a moment. "You think that's all people see?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "That's all they've ever seen." The words lingered, heavy and tired. He wasn't defending himself, just stating a truth that had probably followed him for years. Amelia looked out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. "You didn't have to hide who you were for me to like you," she said finally. "I didn't hide it for you," he said. "I hid it for me." The simplicity of it hit her harder than anger ever could. Because he wasn't wrong. He was a man trying to live without the weight of who he used to be. Still, she felt a distance now, one that wasn't measured in space but in understanding. Over the next few weeks, they saw less of each other. Not because they wanted to, but because neither knew how to bridge the silence. When he called, his voice was calm as always, but she could hear the restraint underneath. When she replied, Hayes carried the same. At work, Amelia's project with Cal's former company began to succeed. Her boss praised her, told her she had a natural instinct for people. She smiled, said thank you, and thought of Cal, the man who quietly opened that door for her and never took credit. One evening, while reviewing reports, she came across an internal note. It mentioned that the deal had been facilitated by prior leadership ties. The phrase made her stop. She realized what it meant. The opportunity she had now existed because of him. The next night, she called him. He answered after one ring. "Amelia." "Did you do it?" she asked softly. "Did you make that deal happen?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I might have called in a favor. You earned it, though. I just cleared the noise. Her throat tightened. You shouldn't have done that. Why not? Because now I don't know what's real. His voice dropped. Everything else was. For a second, neither spoke. Then she said, I just needed to know that what I built myself. You did, he replied gently. I just made sure someone finally saw it. That night, after the call ended, Amelia sat in the dark for a long time. Not angry, not sad, just quiet. She realized that what hurt wasn't his help, but how invisible she'd been before he offered it. A few days later, she went to the cafe again, alone this time. Same corner table, same empty chair across from her. She ordered coffee and stared at the rain sliding down the glass. She thought about Cal, his honesty, his restraint, his way of carrying guilt like it was part of breathing. She didn't blame him for what he'd done, but she knew something had changed. They were two people who'd both built walls, hers made of caution, his made of regret, and neither knew how to climb over them. That weekend, she got a message from him. Leaving for a few days. Need to handle something. She typed back, everything okay? Just unfinished business, he replied. And that was it. No explanation. No promise of when he'd be back. For the first time, she didn't try to fill the silence. She just let it exist, heavy but honest. When she walked home that night, she realized something she hadn't before. Sometimes distance doesn't mean the story's over. Sometimes it's a space people need to remember who they are before they meet again. She looked up at the sky, gray, quiet, endless, and whispered to herself, maybe he's finding his way back. And even though she didn't know if he ever would, for the first time, she wasn't afraid to wait. It had been 2 months since Cal left. No calls, no messages, no explanations. At first, Amelia checked her phone constantly, then less, and eventually not at all. That's how silence works. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It builds, quietly, until it feels normal. She focused on work, filled her days with motion. Projects, meetings, deadlines. People started calling her the calm one in the office, the person who never lost her temper, who always found balance. They didn't know it came from learning how to breathe through loss without letting it break her. Then, one morning, she opened her email and froze. It was from Cal. Just one line. Meet me where it began, if you still want to. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then stopped. There was nothing to type. She just closed her laptop, grabbed her coat, and left. When she reached the cafe, it was almost empty. The same window seat. The same soft light spilling across the table. And him, sitting there, looking almost the same, but not quite. There was something quieter about him now. He stood as she approached. Didn't think you'd come, he said. I almost didn't, she replied. They sat down. The silence was thick but not heavy, more like two people waiting to see if the ground was still there beneath them. I went back, he said finally, to the company. Not to stay, just to finish what I left undone. I had to make peace with it. Amelia studied him. And did you? He nodded slowly. Mostly. I sold my shares, closed everything that tied me there. I thought I could build a life pretending that part of me didn't exist, but I can't. I needed to own it before I could start again. She looked at him quietly. There was no pride in his voice, no regret, just acceptance. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the rain outside. You were right, he said. I hid because I didn't like who I was. And I thought if someone saw all of it, they'd walk away. I didn't, she said softly. I know. He smiled faintly. That's what scared me most. For a while, they said nothing. Just 2 coffees between them, and the sound of rain filling the silence. Then Amelia spoke. You could have told me sooner. I know. And you could have trusted me with the truth. I should have. The conversation wasn't dramatic. No raised voices, no tears. It was calm, measured, like 2 people building something new out of what was left. Finally, he asked, Do you think it's too late? Amelia thought about everything. The quiet evenings, the messages that stopped, the ache of waiting for someone who may never return. Then she said, Maybe it's too late to go back, but not too late to begin again. He nodded, eyes soft. I'd like that. They talked for hours after that, about everything and nothing, life, mistakes, family, the weight of pretending. He told her he was moving to another city to start a small business, something simple, something his own. I'm not running this time, he said, just choosing differently. She smiled. That sounds like peace. He looked at her and said quietly, It could be, if you're in it. Her breath caught, but she didn't answer right away. She'd learned not to rush moments like this. They lose meaning when forced. Instead, she asked, Are you sure you're ready for something real this time? He met her gaze. I wasn't before. I am now. The cafe lights flickered as evening settled in. People began to leave, and for the first time in months, Amelia felt still, not uncertain, not guarded, just still. When they finally stood to leave, Cal said, You always said you wanted something simple. Just peace, not promises. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's all love really is, peace that doesn't need proving. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city glowed with reflections of streetlights on wet pavement. They walked slowly, side by side, without holding hands. Some things didn't need to be decided that night. At the corner, he turned to her. Thank you, he said. For what? For not giving up on the idea that people can change. She looked at him and said softly, I never stopped believing that. I just stopped waiting for it. He smiled, a quiet, tired smile that somehow felt lighter than before. Maybe that's why I found it. As he walked away, she didn't call out, didn't ask him to stay. She just watched him disappear into the crowd, a calmness settling in her chest. Back home, she sat by the window, listening to the quiet hum of the city. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Not because someone had come back, but because she'd finally come back to herself. Some stories don't end with grand gestures. They end when both people finally hear themselves think, when the noise fades, and what remains is truth. And maybe that was their story, not a perfect ending, but an honest one. The story may be over, but the conversation starts now. Comment your reaction, and don't forget to like and follow.